So before this video starts, I want to say a couple things. First thing is I want to apologize that I did not upload this video in time. I shot this video in 2 parts, and the second part wasn't uploading right, and I did everything to upload it correctly so I can get it edited, and it just would not upload. It wouldn't even show on my laptop, so that was a struggle. So this video only has the first part of my review. Secondly, this review is kind of a rough cut. I'm still trying to figure out what angle I want to do this at and how I want it to be kind of shot and put out there. So this is my first one, and I have so many ideas on how to make the next one better. So if you watch it, thank you, and hopefully you guys stick around for the reviews to come. Thank you. Enjoy the video.
Hello, welcome to Whining About Books, where I review a good book with a stiff drink in my hand. My name is Paige Love, and welcome to my very first book review. It may be a little rough, so please hang tight and stick with me. Something to note starting off is I am looking to my laptop for notes, so that is why you will see me keep referring to this. Also, this is not just a brief overview of the book or me giving it a rating of stars or numbers or whatever. I want my book review to be enlightening, to be fun, so you should go into this expecting some spoilers. So grab your book if you have it, and grab your drink because I know you got it, and let's whine about some books. Today's review is of The Tiger's Wife, written by Taya Aubret. Just a quick synopsis of who Taya Aubret is. I am going to read from the little flap in the book. Taya Aubret was born in Belgrade in the former Yugoslavia in 1985 and has lived in the United States since the age of 12. Her writing has been published in The New Yorker, The Atlantic, Harper's, and The Guardian, and has been anthologized in the Best American Short Stories and the Best American Non-Required Reading. She has been named by The New Yorker as one of the 20 best American fiction writers under 40 and included in the National Book Foundation's list of 5 under 35. And she lives in New York. Now, The Tiger's Wife is a work of fiction set in an unnamed country in the Balkans. So we're talking about countries like Albania, Bosnia, Romania, Croatia. It is from the viewpoint of a young doctor named Natalia, who tells of her grandfather's death and his life. And she weaves together the past and the present in stories of both legend and folklore, all while the characters in the book are faced with the anticipation of war or are fully immersed in war, and also the after effects of war. So it's there in those stories where we are able to see a more full picture of who her grandfather was. Now, within the story, which we will jump into soon, there is a drink that is referred to many, many times, and that drink is called rakia or rakia. I am not sure of the pronunciation, but it is spelled R-A-K-I-J-A, and I believe that J makes a Y sound. It is a drink local to the Balkans, and it is made from fruits such as plums and apricots, and you also have some made from walnuts. And today I was able to find a drink made in Croatia that is very similar to rakia, and it is a cherry rakia, which makes my drink of choice tonight the Balkan Fruit Cup. It includes cherry rakia, Cointreau, lemon juice, and for my own little razzle dazzle, I mashed up a strawberry and a blackberry, put that in the bottom of that, and also a dash of orange bitters. So let's give it a taste. That is good. It's sweet, it's fruity, it's got a little kick. Oh, that is wonderful. The lemon just comes through real nice. But anyway, let's get into it. So I'm going to start with the themes of the book, and then I'll jump into maybe a few chapters, some parts of the book that I thoroughly enjoyed. And then at the end, I will go in with my personal thoughts and how I truly feel about the book, aside from what was kind of brought up throughout the story. So the biggest theme in this book is death. We are faced with it from the very beginning, obviously, with it being the start of her grandfather's death. And she starts off with a memory of her grandfather, and that's how we enter into the story. And she talks about how she would go to the zoo with her grandfather, and they would walk up, and her grandmother would send them off with a little baggie of treats so they would go with sugar cubes for the ponies that pull the park carriage, and carrots and celery for the sheep, and the deer and the bull, and cabbage heads for the hippopotamuses. And I just thought that was so touching. If you have ever been close with your grandparents, when they do pass, that's kind of what you think about, those moments that are special. And I know for me, I was able to be a part of my grandfather's life, when it came to the later years in his life. And I was tasked with kind of being a caretaker for him, and being able to spend the day with him and go out, take him to his doctor's appointments and things. But one thing that will always be a very, very great memory of my grandfather and I is when I would take him to In-N-Out, even though he was not supposed to be eating In-N-Out. And he loved it so much. And I just looked forward to that day of the week where he would just kind of have this like playful, childlike, like devilish grin on his face, like, hey, you want to go to In-N-Out? Are you hungry? And I would get so excited, like I was a child again, and be like, yeah, let's do it. And it'd be he and I kind of, sneaking through the day, getting In-N-Out, coming back to the house and just chowing down. And my mom would come home asking what we did for the day. And sometimes we would conveniently leave out that we got In-N-Out. So that's what we're faced with from the very beginning of the story, is the memories of her grandfather. And that is also when we come into knowledge of the tiger. It's not until later in the book where we find out who the tiger's wife is, which I'm not going to lie, I thought was just like, I guess I don't want to spoil it. We'll get to it later. But yeah, so we're from the very beginning of the book, we are faced with death. And we are faced with death in many forms. So we have her grandfather's death. We have the rituals of the people in this country when they are faced with someone's death. So basically the family that's left behind after the death, where they kind of do this mourning for 40 days. I guess it's not much of a mourning, but it's more of a ritual where they leave the person's belongings how they are and how they were in their daily life. So the grandfather passed, and the grandmother, his wife, she wants to make sure that the foods that he ate are still kind of there and hanging out. His clothes are out and on the bed. The newspaper that he would read, his wallet and things, which the granddaughter actually has to bring back in order for this 40 days to start. And the idea is, if you leave out their belongings, it helps them kind of find their way into the afterlife and then be picked up by the Mora, which is a spirit who kind of leads them to where they're supposed to be in the afterlife. Which, I think every culture kind of has their idea of mourning and their rituals in mourning and their idea of what the afterlife is. So I did find that interesting. Not that I sort of believe what they believe in the book, but it was interesting to kind of read that part. And then now the fruit obviously is soaked in the alcohol, and you drink that right up. Oh, that is good. It almost takes you out of this here and wants you to go back and indulge here. But I'm going to do my best to stay on topic. So going beyond her grandfather's death, we are faced with death throughout the book in the terms of war. So each chapter kind of takes on a different time. So it'll be in the times of the grandfather when he was a child. It'll be in the present day of Natalia going to this monastery to give vaccinations to these orphans, to these orphan children. It goes to the grandfather's kind of late 20s, early 30s, where he, meets people throughout his life and tells of a story of characters that the grandfather has come in contact with as a young boy, and it goes into the lives of those individuals and what they think of death and things like that. So one of the characters, he is called Darissa. There are definitely many versions that you are hearing me call this man, but I found his take on death the most interesting. So let me find it. And he's also called the bear. The reason why he's called the bear is because he goes out and hunts bear. Well, he hunts mostly bear, and he will hunt basically anything in order to have the joy of bringing them back to life through taxidermy and basically seeing them in this former glory. And there comes through like the village that her grandfather grew up in, the tale of why he's called the bear, and it goes beyond him just wanting to kill bears and then bring them back to life through taxidermy. He actually, when he goes out, he'll wear a bear pelt, a bear fur. And they say that because he's never caught in the village with his guns, it's insinuated that he tucks them away in the forest before he comes into the village, so that when he actually goes out and hunts, he grabs his guns there. But because the villagers have never seen him with the guns, they deduce that, when he goes out hunting, he actually turns into a bear and takes the animals down himself. So it's very interesting the way these small town legends come about, which we will go into soon after this. Here's kind of how he looks at, not kind of, here's how Darissa looks at death. Young boys are fascinated with animals, but for Darissa, the hysterical dream of the golden labyrinth, coupled with the silent sanctuary of the trophy room, amounted to a much simpler notion. Absence, solitude, and then, at the end of it all, death in thousands of forms, standing in that hall with frankness and clarity. Death had size and color and shape, texture and grace. There was something concrete to it. In that room, death had come and gone, swept by, and left behind a mirage of life. It was possible, he realized, to find life in death. And so death is not just grim for him. It's not the stopping place for him. It is the place where if you choose to stay there, you could stay. But if you choose to live on, you can as well. And that's how he thinks of taxidermy. He doesn't just see the animal dead. He sees what it was, what it is now in death, and what it can be beyond death. And I thought, with how grim this book is, with so much death in it, his take on it probably was one of my favorites. The grandfather, because he's a doctor, or maybe because of the life he has lived, he kind of has this almost like nonchalance about death. And I don't know if this came about in his old age, or if it came about during war, or if it came about from meeting Death's nephew. Now, that might sound odd, and I remember when I first read it, I was like, that's interesting. But no, the grandfather, over the course of his life, well, actually not the course of his life, but when he hits his early adult years, he meets this man, the Deathless Man, who is another part of this story. And this Deathless Man cannot die. And he meets him 3 times that I read in this book. And basically, the 3 times we find he meets him, it's him telling the story to his granddaughter. And he doesn't believe that this man can cannot die. So he puts him to the test. They wager about it. And sure enough, the man doesn't die. But this does not sway the grandfather in the least. He still kind of almost humors the deathless man, like, okay, well, tell me more. Actually urges him to tell him more, because the deathless man is not fully interested in telling his story at first. But what happens is, as they meet the second time and the third time, the grandfather, I believe, becomes a little bit more convinced each time, because each time he sees him, the grandfather is getting older, yet the deathless man has not aged one bit. And the deathless man explains that he is not death himself, but he is death's nephew. And the reason why he cannot die is because he fell in love with this young woman. And instead of sticking to the wager, or sticking to the agreement between him and his uncle, which is, if you find someone who isn't about to die, you smash this cup that they have been drinking coffee from. I know that sounds confusing, but if you have read the book, you'll know what I'm talking about. And because the deathless man broke their agreement, now Death, his uncle, has cursed him to a life of never being able to die. But he never loses his ability to be able to tell if others around him are on their way to death in the more immediate sense, rather than, taking the mindset that the grandfather has, which is, well, everyone's marching towards death because everyone dies someday. So as you see, death is such a theme in this book, and it is, I can't say for certain whether I found it heavy or light. Definitely not light, and not exactly heavy. I think there are parts of the book where I almost found humor in some of the deaths, and I think that's what kind of lessened the blow of this book. One of the last things I will say in the theme of death is that the grandfather, although everyone is going to meet death at some point, everyone is going to die, the grandfather seems like he has the most personal relationship with death, because he has these encounters with the deathless man. So he, like, as they meet over the 3 times, of course they're talking, they're having conversations, and they become fond of one another. Towards the end, you almost see them as friends. They share a meal and they're indulging with one another, but they're also indulging the waiter who's serving them, because he is going to die the very next day after serving them this amazing meal. So the grandfather has not quite walked with death, but has walked almost like a parallel life with it. And I think that's what makes his dying, which he died of cancer, the grandfather died of cancer, I think that's what makes his journey to death something that he's able to accept with such ease. So that was a very interesting theme in this book. Now, don't get me wrong, like, I do have more to say on it, but I want to make sure that I hit all the points that I want to hit, which the next point is legend, folklore, and the small town gossip and tall tales that twist the truth of one's journey through life, whether it's good or bad. We come across a lot of small towns, a lot of small villages in this book. And the grandfather, he grew up in a small town, and the tales these people weave in order to justify their fears, or to justify their gossiping, or to just kind of zhuzh up a little excitement in the village, is astounding to me. Now, give me a minute, because my son just woke up and I have to go put him back down to sleep. I shall return, but first. Oh, that's good. All right, bud, I'm coming.